Hello, welcome to St Michael's Hill. Firstly, I would like to say thank you to everyone who has taken the time to look at my first two videos, the layout tour and the Meet the Fleet video. The response has been wonderful. I really didn't expect so many people to check them out, and the comments and the subscribes have been great, and I'd just like to thank everyone for doing that. This video is going to be a little bit different. It's the first probably in a series of videos that are going to be looking at this Lima Class 33. It's a fairly nice model, it runs well. It fits in well with the era of my layout. Obviously 33s generally were in the southern region a lot more than the western region, but this particular locomotive, 33051 Shakespeare Cliff, was actually a locomotive that was put into this slight variation of Dutch livery with a lighter roof, and then toured the country just before the 33s were supposed to be removed from service. So it's a locomotive that certainly would have been able to work on rail tours all around the country, and so it is a locomotive that I'm interested to keep on the layout. The model, like I say, is fairly decent. Being a Lima from the late 90s, it's quite detailed. There was certainly an upgrade on the previous Lima 33, but it certainly isn't perfect and doesn't really stand up to the Heljan version of the 33 that is available at the moment. The first thing that's going to be done to the locomotive is to convert it to DCC. I'm going to use this Hornby 4-function locomotive decoder that I picked up from D-Rails in Gloucestershire. It's a basic decoder. When you're hardwiring a decoder, there's no point in spending a lot of money on a kind of super flash decoder, so I've just gone for this basic 4-function one. I'm probably not going to use the light functions at this stage, although it's nice to have a decoder that could possibly do that if I decide to add lighting to this model. The second thing I will be doing is adding flush glazing. Now, I say this is the second thing, it'll probably be the thing that I do last. So I need to remove the Lima glazing and pop in this Southeastern fine cast flush glazing. It's not something I've done before, so it will be an interesting experiment for sure to see how that goes. The other thing I'm going to be doing is looking at the buffer beams and the buffers. So at the moment they're very plain. So I've picked up this Heljan 33 spares sprue from Howell's models, which includes the buffer beams for the Class 33. So I'm going to see about removing what is currently here on the Lima model, which is very plain, and add the buffer beams that you can see here. So here are the two buffer beams, and we'll try and add those to the 33 from Lima. I'm told that they do fit with a little bit of work, so it'll be a bit of experimentation. And finally, as these buffer beams don't come with buffers, I've also got some metal buffers from Lanarkshire Models and Supplies, so I'm going to be fitting those as well. That is what I'm going to initially do to the locomotive. Beyond that, I am looking at changing the grills for shore plan etched ones, and as well the roof fan here. I'm going to see if that's something that I can also change for an etched grill. The first of these jobs is probably going to be to take apart the locomotive and look at how we can fit the buffer beams. There we go. What is quite nice actually with the Lima model is that the glazing as well is all one piece, and it just slips out, so should make the insertion of new glazing a little bit easier. And then what's left is a fairly decent body shell. The handrails aren't separately fitted, but there's a fair amount of depth to them. Like I said, the grills aren't incredible by any means, so that might be something I look to change if the shore plan ones look nice. To make the job a little bit easier when it comes to the buffer beams, I'm just going to take apart take out the mechanism and the bogies just to reveal the chassis. So, as with all the old Lima models, there's a big metal block, and then this simply slips off, which releases the bogie, and then the other bogie is a case of just simply pulling apart, giving it a slight release, and there we go. So this is what we're left with, the chassis, and as you can see, the buffer beam is very plain and it's fixed on. So I'm just going to have a little bit of a look at how I'm going to remove what is currently here and how it's going to be replaced. First thing to do then is to cut out the new buffer beam from the sprue. So simply they're released like so. So what is left is the buffer beam, which, if it focuses, there we go, is a lot more detailed. So I think the first thing we're going to need to do is just remove the buffers. So I'm going to keep what protrudes just in case they can be used to fit in here if the metal buffers aren't going to be possible for whatever reason. And as you can see, they fit quite nicely into the holes. Already you think if we can fit that onto there, it's already looking a lot better. Now it's just a case of marking out what needs to be removed. So it's effectively going to be the whole of this front section here.
Should leave us with enough left to attach this new buffer beam onto.
Now that most of the material has been removed, I just need to sand this down and then look to fit this on. There's still certainly a few mil that needs to be removed before this will fit nice and flush. I'll probably remove some of these prongs that probably slot into the Heljan model on this conversion. They're going to be pretty useless. So that's pretty much there. I'm just going to remove the backs of here and I will then look to see how it fits. I'm just going to check now with the body shell how that's going to line up. It's not only got to fit obviously on the chassis but also make the body fit around it as well. So as we can see, this top lip here looks like it goes up inside will have to go up inside the nose of the 33 here. So I'm going to have to take a little bit more material off just so it slots in okay. So yeah, it just needs a couple more mil off the front here, and this will slot up inside quite nicely. So as you can see now, the buffer beams fit in place very nicely, and already is looking so much better than what was there before. I'm just going to have to do the other end now, so I'll do this speed up. And the same as the first, I'm just going to lock the additional bits of plastic off this, and we should then be ready to get it installed. So I've now cut out both ends of the chassis to allow the new buffer beam to slide in. So they're going to be glued into place, although I have had a quick look at the bogies, and I think where the large coupling is, these sections here are actually going to foul the coupling. So I need to think about how I'm going to do that. I'm probably only going to have the one coupling on the locomotive, so at the front there probably won't be a coupling at all, which will allow me to detail the end, and then the other end I'll put a coupling on now. Whether I stick with these large tension lock couplings or try and work out another way is kind of remains to be seen, although I would say at the moment it's probably best that I allow it to work with these couplings in place. So on one end I'm going to remove these small sections of plastic and get that all in place.
So just cut those flush with the buffer beam.
It's amazing how much stronger the Heljan plastic is than the old Lima plastic. There we go. Just tidy up the ends. Nice smooth edge there. Beautiful. So hopefully that should now slot into position. And won't foul the bogie. So it should be okay. The only other thing I was going to quickly say is that having a look at these buffers, they're actually slightly smaller in dimension than, in diameter than the ones that have been removed. So having a look at it, the level of detailing on the buffer beam itself with the stalk for the buffer is actually fairly detailed, and as these fit very nicely, I'm probably going to leave these on and use these buffers for another project. So that makes my life slightly easier, a bit of a bonus, and I think the level of detail is pretty good on these plastic Heljan ones, so I'll leave that for there. I need to work out exactly where I'm going to glue the buffer beam onto. I'm thinking it might be slightly easier to glue it straight to the body rather than the chassis. I don't know if you can see very easily, but if you take this out, the curve of the front of the nose obviously fits the buffer perfectly, so it might be an easier job to glue that straight in and then have the chassis then clip on as per usual. It's probably the slightly easier way around it. In fact, that's almost certainly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to use a little bit of polystyrene cement to just glue these buffer beams in place. Just going to check, I'm going to remove the buffers for a start, and then just check where exactly they need to be glued in. So effectively the corners there need to be flush on the edge, and the rest of it should fit in naturally. Polystyrene cement is a weld bonder, I believe, so once it's in place it kind of melts slightly and then forms a weld. So I just need to make sure that when it's in place, we're good. The best thing to do is to place a little bit of this along the front. It's going to dry very quickly, so. Quite happy with that. Now that's in place, I'm going to add a little bit more of the glue just to hold it in place. Make sure it doesn't move. Just creating a very strong bond. And then I'll repeat the same at the other end. Once it's located, it's just a case of holding it for a few seconds until the glue sets and we're good to go. Quite happy with that, so now I'll add a little bit more, just finish off the job. So there we go. I'm quite happy with that, how that looks. Definitely an improvement on what was there before on both ends. Just going to check that the chassis now fits back in okay. And there we go. Chassis fits back on okay. So that's the end of today's video. Thank you very much for joining me. In the next part we're going to look at the couplings and how they can be modified and to generally look a bit more prototypical. Following that I'll have a look at putting the flush glazing in, see how I get on with that. And then there'll also be a video showing you how I kind of hardwire the loco to run on DCC before a final part of the final touches, looking at weathering and maybe changing those grills if I'm brave enough to take the plunge. So thank you very much for joining me today, and I will catch you soon. Goodbye.